Welcome to our February Hub Forum. Just as a reminder, please turn off your AI in these Hub meetings. We are trying to record them for folks, so we will distribute so that you can watch them later at your leisure. Upcoming events, we have a fun group of folks working on a screening of Women in Carbon. And the showing of that film coincides with the Building Energy Conference. It's the night before March 19th. The conference is the 20th and the 21st. Design for Freedom Summit is the 27th. We've got a lot going on in March. I want to say thank you to Aiden Myers. He's our communications manager now. I'm really excited to have him on board and help us out with all things communications. I also want to send out a huge thank you to Anna. Again, she's not on right now, but she has been spearheading our website, the Women of Carbon screening. So she's really doing a lot for us right now. And then let's just get started because I'm really excited about the content today. We're going to have a series of loosely Pechakucha presentations for folks that are presenting at the Building Energy Conference. We're really excited to be sort of collaborating a little bit more with all the local organizations. And I think this is a really fantastic way to show how much our groups have such good cross-pollination, people working on all sorts of things. So I'm going to keep moving. Oh, one more slide. This is the Women of Carbon screening. We have like an incredible lineup of women that are going to be speaking. We haven't decided if it's before or after the film. We'll keep you posted on that, but it's just going to be a great conversation about what's happening locally with carbon and women specifically. Leah Ellis of Sublime will be on the panel, and we've also secured Bonnie McLean as the moderator of that panel. So we're all quite excited about that. So save the date, March 19th, 5 p.m. at the Engine in Cambridge. So here's a lineup of folks that are frequently in our CLF community that have presentations. Our very own Jacob Racusin is one of the conference chairs, and he's going to sort of start us off as an introduction to what the theme is this year and his goal as chair, I think. Yep, start on that one. Jacob, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Sunny. Super excited to see these previews for NESEA, and I'm just absolutely thrilled to be bringing NESEA community and CLF community closer together. That was a really big intention of mine as co-chair, and all of my dreams are being realized. I'll be really short because this is the focus is really on these presentations, but I was just going to read out the conference theme so we're clear about that as the sort of through line between all of the content that we're going to be seeing this morning. As NESEA celebrates our 50th anniversary, this year's Building Energy Boston Conference is all about working together to build the movement. That is the formal theme, building the movement. Building a movement requires reaching beyond our traditional networks and silos, engaging with utilities regarding electrification and thermal energy networks, training emerging professionals and career changers, collaborating with finance providers to unlock capital for bold new projects, and much more. It also means including and empowering those in backgrounds and identities traditionally underrepresented in this space. Our industry faces a great challenge in transitioning to a zero carbon sector. This can feel overwhelming and impossible as an individual practitioner or company, but when our efforts are aligned and supported in community, we find possibility and opportunity for great change. By building a movement together, we can bring about changes at the scale required to achieve a sustainable and equitable built environment. And my own little personal commentary onto this is that we are all laboring on making systems level changes, which is by definition impossible to do within the context of an individual practice or even an individual sort of focus group. And so the intention for me around building the movement is to bring like-minded and aligned organizations together that are working on a systems level, creating change, to be able to find each other and collaborate and connect, and through the vehicle of this conference to be able to uplift and more greatly sort of actualize the work that we're trying to do. So we're bringing CLF into the fold with NESEA or vice versa, or bringing them together is one small part of sort of intersectional, sort of systems level change work that we as organizations can achieve when we work together. I'll leave it there and pass it to Michelle for the first presentation.
Great, thanks, Jacob. I think there's a few new folks on here, so I'll just introduce myself. Welcome, thanks for joining us if you're new. My name is Michelle Lambert, and I work for the Carbon Leadership Forum national nonprofit organization. I'm on the policy team and also on the engagement team across all the different regional hubs that we have. Just a note that I think I mentioned last time, but I'll just keep reiterating. We're now, the nonprofit is now calling ourselves CLF HQ. We used to be CLF National, but we now have a regional hub in Kenya, which is really exciting, and more hubs kind of in the works internationally. So it's a little bit funny to get used to, but we are now CLF HQ. But I also have been a part of the Boston Northeast Hub for a long time. So today I'm representing CLF HQ in the keynote and the session that we are working on. So next slide. So I'm talking about sort of two different components. The first is the opening keynote, which is going to be given by Andrew Himes, who is the Director of Collective Impact for the Carbon Leadership Forum nonprofit. He is a phenomenal speaker. He is a force in the world of collective impact initiatives and has done a TED Talk and a number of other keynotes on this topic. We are so fortunate that he's coming from Seattle to deliver the keynote for NESEA and then to do a follow-up session afterwards. So essentially what he's going to be highlighting and then what we're going to be following up on afterwards is all of these various collective impact initiatives across all of our sectors within the built environment, within sustainability in the built environment. All of these different initiatives that have popped up over the last, 10 years up until very recently in the past year, that are very often interdisciplinary, very often all volunteer led, and really based in mission driven and passionate desire for systemic change in the built environment, like Jacob was just talking about. So there'll be an opening keynote that Andrew's giving on Thursday morning, and then Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So sort of like bookending that day, there's going to be a session on some digging into some examples of collective impact in our industry. So then the next slide. We are so fortunate that we have been able to bring together the founders, very often the founders of 8 different collective impact initiatives. So I'm going to be speaking about the CLF regional hubs and also the ECHO project, which stands for Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization, which is a group of 18 different organizations across our industry that are working on alignment for embodied carbon data collection and reporting. We are going to have James Kitchen talking about the Bio-Based Materials Collective, which is a relatively new collective impact initiative. I don't think he's here, but he's going to be talking on a couple of different panels, but he's going to be part of this one. We have Nadav Malin, who was formerly with Building Green. I'm sure everyone knows him from Building Green, has now started a new organization called Green Commons, and he's going to be talking about the peer networks that have been in existence for many, many years, sustainable design leaders, mechanical design leaders, etc. We have Julie Janitsky from MEP 2040 talking about that initiative for working on embodied carbon in MEP systems. Lori Ferris is going to be talking about 2 different impact initiatives related to existing buildings. So the Climate Heritage Network and also the Zero Net Carbon collaboration, something. Basically, it's about zero net carbon initiatives for existing buildings and cultural heritage. So she's going to be talking about those initiatives. We have Kate Stevenson, who's going to be talking about NESEA's Building Energy Bottom Lines, which is a group of small businesses within the NESEA community. Mike Grinnick's going to be talking about SE 2050. He was one of the founders of that. And then Chris Magwood is going to be talking about Home Builders Can, so bringing in the home building community to this conversation as well. So in that session, we're going to all be doing really quick kind of level setting introductions to what all these different initiatives are, and then having a really fantastic panel discussion across all of these fantastic people talking about, if you go to the next slide, the 5 different conditions of the framework of collective impact. So talking about common agenda, how you establish shared measurement, shared goals and shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communications, and having a strong backbone. So these are all the essential elements of collective impact initiatives. And we're going to be touching on kind of how all these different initiatives have similarities, how they're different, how they've grown over many years or just grown within the past year. And then kind of having conversations about how they have managed to be so impactful and make such a significant difference, being mostly volunteer-led and in some ways just organically formed. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah, so hoping everyone is able to join both of those. I think they're going to be some pretty fantastic conversations. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle.
And I'll pass it over to Michael and Olivia.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my phone wanted to go to my headphones suddenly when I got a call. Hi. Olivia and I will be presenting this year at NESEA, the first time I've ever been at NESEA as a contractor, but we'll be talking about building material reuse and circularity. And you can probably go to the next slide real quick, kind of the intro. A lot of this has been kind of building not only with the reuse group over the past couple of years, but what we found is that these collaborative workshops, similar to what we did, Laurel and I did last year at the Northeast Carbon Summit, are really good for kind of bringing all these parties together, and oftentimes where we have little siloed moments, really making, okay, how can we make these connections and push everything forward? So knowing that our topic is building material reuse and circularity, really just looking to continue to build the movement that we've seen, and continue to kind of pull these players together, and then also talk about kind of the real carbon and data impacts of all of this so far. We can probably go to the next slide. So really, why presenting at NESEA about reuse, not only to expand what we've been doing and really kind of continue to reach more of the audience, more of the designer and engineer audience, but also kind of continue to build the movement and collaboration in all this. And we really want to kind of, the buckets you see on the bottom, like how do we actually go about doing this? A lot of the presentations and group work and workshops we've done before have really kind of started to isolate these very kind of poignant pieces of what is needed going forward to really reach towards circularity. It isn't anymore like, what would the first steps look like? It's now people have started taking the first steps. So how do we not only work in these footsteps already taken, but now continue to go forward and kind of go kind of piece by each single one of these.
Our session is going to be a workshop. So after introducing why reuse and different strategies to work on them, we're going to have people in groups at their tables. We'll assign each table a specific reuse strategy and have them get into the weeds of how to implement it. So maybe the first 15 minutes of the workshop, people are going to generate all the questions they have about them. So say, specify, salvage, and reuse in design and construction documents. People thinking of the questions like, okay, where in the specifications would I put it? What sections does it apply to? When do I need to talk to the owner about their general requirements? Thinking about those questions. And then the second half, we'll mix up the groups and have the second group come up with the responses and procedural steps and how to answer the questions that other people came up with. So we're hoping to benefit from having designers and contractors, having a mixed group, all be able to tackle the challenges together and come up with the solutions together.
Yeah, and the picture you see on the side there, that was another workshop that was held at Greenbelt last year with a lot of the All for Reuse members from across the country. It did focus on the Boston area just because a lot of All for Reuse members identified our area as being, they kept saying, this close. So we're hoping to continue to kind of push this forward and with each of these strategies, not only say, hey, this is a strategy that we think could work, but also this is a strategy that we can give examples to, whether through our own personal or other kind of members of the group have done themselves. So it's not like this strategy is completely new and never been tested. We do have with an example today, the CLF Reuse group is meeting around 1 o'clock, if anyone wants to join that as well. But we'll be showing off specifications from a white paper that was out last year that are material reuse specifications. We have talked before about material take-back programs and showed some data on both the carbon and cost savings. What does minimum verifiable see in the version? There's other places doing that. So we really want to get into the weeds a bit here and then really pull out what does carbon, what does cost, what does actuality look like in this, and how do we keep kind of building the snowball. I think that's it. Anything else?
That's good.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michael and Olivia. Sorry I didn't mean to forward. You were not at 5 minutes. Jim, are you on?
Yep. Good morning, everybody. This is fun. This is super fun. So I want to hit the next slide. So the presentation at NESEA is about a project that we're working on, but it's a kind of a collective project. You notice a bunch of different folks down there at the bottom. There's a lot of different folks participating in this project to create. I want you to hit the next slide. To create a practice guide for soil management aiming at soil carbon. So the whole idea here, so first, from Jared's perspective, system evolution is our jam. And we are working in this way, we're working to evolve the construction and development systems to really support soil carbon, which turns out to be pretty important in our world. So this is the presentation of NESEA is really expanding the view of carbon into the landscape and the ways in which we affect the landscape. We have 5 big goals. One is to enhance our understanding of soil health. One is to strengthen existing professional networks and support new partnerships. One is to enable better communication and coordination across disciplines, which turns out to be key. One is to identify key challenges and limitations to doing this work, and then finally to provide actionable recommendations and strategies for everyone to share and use. The presentation in NESEA, there's going to be a key part of that presentation, which is really sort of crowdsourcing challenges and barriers. Next slide. The barriers that we've seen, right? Lots of different barriers that we run across. One of them is standard resources and specifications are pretty siloed and dispersed in different folks. One of them is that new science-backed practices are hard to get into the industry. Ooh, I like that one. One of them is that specifications typically ignore the role and dynamics of soil organic carbon. Next one. So I love this slide, and you'll get to see this later, but the lower half circle is carbon stored in soil, and the upper half circle is carbon stored in vegetation. So we are in temperate forests. You can see that it's about 2 to 1 soil carbon to vegetation carbon. That's probably a surprise for a lot of folks. Next slide. If you hit it again. Yeah, there we go. If you look across Massachusetts, this is the soil organic carbon map of Massachusetts. You can see the darker colors are where it's more intense, sort of, Pine Valley, of course, and some areas down sort of south. You can also see where soil organic carbon is stored in different landscape types. And you'll note this is average stock per acre, that agriculture and turf are very similar. The highest, of course, is wetlands. One more reason you never want to touch wetlands. Next slide. So this is all based on reaching the goals set forth in the Massachusetts Healthy Soils Action Plan that was released a couple of years ago by the governor's office. You can move on. You can find all this stuff on the Mass Healthy Soils website that was on the first page, but you can also Google it and you'll find that website. So there are a couple of different types of risks that we see in projects. One of them is what happens in demolition and site preparation. You chew up the soil, you lose 25 to 60% of the total SOC in that soil horizon structure. You can Google soil horizons if you get lost in this. One of the things about this presentation is it's a little technical. So we're going to do a little bit of a presentation at the beginning of the session to really set the technical aspects forward. But the reality of working with soil organic carbon is really about relationships and people. A lot of times in engineered stormwater solutions, external fertilization sources become necessary. Stockpiling is a real problem, and emissions increase every time soil is moved. Next slide. So some of the things that are worth knowing is you should probably test, understand what you got. We did this, some of you are probably on this project. We did this at the Tobin School, right? Tobin School's, pretty urban site, but right off the bat, we got the teams, the early site teams, to agree to do soil organic carbon tests of soil as well as all the other tests that they were doing. It was an addition of like $10 a test. And so that gave us a whole understanding of what was happening with soil organic carbon on the site, which we could then work to improve. So if you hit the next slide, stockpiling is the next thing. So excavation causes trouble. You want to be really careful. Compacting soils when they are stockpiled depletes organic matter and releases soil organic carbon. As sort of a quickie description, soil has sort of two types of carbon. It's very heavily simplified thought, but there's the volatile carbon that is more dynamic and in flux and sort of in the top layers of soil. And then there's the mineralized carbon, which roots and plants drive into the soil and combine in mineral forms, which is much harder to disturb. So what happens is when you stockpile soil, all the soil organic carbon in the top layers, all the dynamic stuff, essentially disappears. And then you can think about how you bring it back into soil horizons as you do the next step. So the next slide. So this is an example that's really just talking about disturbance, about site disturbance. I'll run through it kind of quick, but over on the left, right, there's biomass carbon and soil organic carbon in this site. It's 2.25 acre site. then there's two different pathways to working on the site. One of them is that essentially the whole 2.25 acres is stripped, stockpiled, and then reused back into the site. The other is that half an acre is stripped and stockpiled, and the other 1.75 acres is left alone. You can see the effect in carbon loss of those two pathways. This is just one example of different ways to handle that. There's a whole other part of this presentation, which is about how you think about amendments and how you design soils. And one of the key things that we've understood, and I'm sure you understand, is that the distribution of decision making around soil is pretty wide. That civil engineers make some decisions, landscape architects make some decisions, excavation contractors make some decisions, general contractors make some decisions, and that they're all kind of separated, and maybe some nice specs come out of the civil. And that's something we're trying to really deal with this project. So I think that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. All right. Andy and Ariel. Do you
Hi.
guys on?
Yes, I'll start us off. Hi, for those of you I haven't yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name's Ariel Brenner. I'm with the New Buildings Institute, sit on our codes and policy team, and I'm involved in the bulk of our embodied carbon work. And I am joined by Andy Buccino, who I'll be co-presenting with at the conference, and whom I will let introduce himself shortly. Maybe next slide. Yeah, I'll just kind of start with at a high level what our presentation will be focusing on. We will be looking at scaling embodied carbon through codes and programs, looking at the existing landscape of codes and policies that are currently out there to address embodied carbon, and then we'll be looking at kind of the most recent and ongoing efforts to either introduce new or evolve existing provisions with a particular focus on model building codes and standards. Here at the New Buildings Institute, we've been involved in a number of those efforts in a couple of different contexts, which I am planning on kind of describing in detail in this presentation. And then Andy will be bringing his perspective on kind of how provisions for measurement, data gathering, and then ultimately embodied carbon reductions are playing out in practice in the region, in the residential sphere, with kind of a highlight on the 100 home study in the Northeast, which he'll describe in greater detail. Next slide. Yeah, so just kind of as a high-level preview of what my piece of the presentation will be looking at, here you see kind of not a completely comprehensive view, but a pretty substantial look at the body of model codes and standards that currently exist and are available for states and jurisdictions to adopt. Currently, there's one model code, the International Green Construction Code, highlighted in green, that addresses embodied carbon. There are efforts now, which we are involved in leading, to kind of evolve those, update them to kind of match where the world is at now when it comes to embodied carbon. So I'll be detailing some of those efforts. You see in orange, there are kind of other standards currently under development to address embodied carbon, including ASHRAE 240P and a ResNet standard for measuring upfront carbon in homes. And then there are codes like the International Building Code, where MBI is currently focusing our efforts and then other codes where we're kind of anticipating potential future activity in upcoming code cycles to kind of try and introduce some new provisions there as well. So I'll be describing some of NBI's efforts, including a code proposal we have recently submitted to the International Building Code, and kind of accompanying engagement with industry and advocates to get some consensus around our draft and come to a proposal that is broadly agreeable. And yeah, before I pass it off to Andy, I just want to say all these presentations I've seen so far today are super compelling, and it's making me really excited for this conference and to meet all of you who will be there. Yeah, so I'll pass it off to Andy.
Thanks, Ariel. I agree with Jim and Ariel. This is some amazing content. I'm really pumped and really honored to be able to participate. I will be transparent. I'm a late game add to Ariel's team, like 48 hours ago. So this is the first time I've seen this slide, or I haven't talked to Ariel since April down in Charlotte. So I'm really happy to see you again, and stoked to be a part of this. Let's leave it here for a second. The 100 home study is kind of the central focus or the hub of where I'll start and present from. I want to say that NBI, I'm really proud to be presenting with you, Ariel. NBI has been a real advocate for our Embodied Carbon Committee from Northeast HERS Alliance. We started in 2021, and their advocacy was a real strong driver to us submitting ideas around the standard 1550. Then Ariel and I collaborated pretty deeply on the technical committee for 1550, along with Jacob and maybe some others on this call. I can't see everybody. But I got a firsthand glimpse of Ariel's tireless work. And speaking of women in carbon, you're a rising star, Ariel, so I'm stoked to be here with you. So thanks. I can't wait for that movie too. That's gonna be great. If you could advance the slide, I'll talk around the 1550 study. Sorry, 100 home study. So we're in the middle of it right now. We got $200,000 from the Mass CEC. I know Bev is not on this call, but Bev Craig was instrumental in accessing this grant money for us. We're doing a 100 home study on embodied carbon, specifically as it relates to HERS ratings, because we recognize that HERS ratings already collected data that was instrumental to materials carbon. We realize we collect between 60 and 90% of all data around residential construction materials carbon. So we put forth standard 1550. It's at the end game right now. Hopefully, I don't know how soon it will be live, but it won't be long. Hopefully by the summer. So standard 1550 will be used, throughout the residential industry. And I would say the 100 home study that we're working on now, I'm doing the QA on it, and we're about 50% done. So we've done, I think, 42 of the 100 homes that we have in the pipeline. Really interesting data. Early results aren't in yet, but I'm collaborating with NMR and hoping to get some good feedback for this NESEA presentation. We're going to kind of be sliding into home plate here head first with the results, but I'm hoping to be able to present some really compelling data around the work that we've been doing, specifically as it's blended reporting between operational and embodied. And then also any impacts on the grid, because we now have the CO2 index from ResNet. So kind of looking at those three pillars of the ResNet kind of triad, we call it the trifecta, as they relate to overall reporting. But the focus will be on materials, carbon, and policy. Specifically, we also got $30,000 from the utilities, from National Grid and Eversource. We're grateful for that, to track MEP, so that we could get real results on MEP. Again, we were approached by the utilities because they wanted to be sure that the 100 home study would be in parallel with standard 1550, inclusive of MEP. GP. So that was a big push for us to make sure that we did it. And so we actually got $230,000 for this study. We're really happy for that. And then the DOER, and I think most people on this call would be aware, but the stretch code public comments that just were released on February 14th, a week ago today, gave an adder of 3 HERS points in the residential marketplace for tracking embodied carbon, materials carbon specific to the shell, and then also separately 3 HERS points for low carbon concrete. Pretty exciting on the material side in Massachusetts. So I think we can really leverage that for this presentation. I don't know if I should say more because Ariel and I need to actually have a conversation. So I think we're going to get together Monday. But that's where we're at. So we look forward to presenting with Ariel and seeing everybody there. I'm really excited and grateful for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Ariel. All right, Christopher, I think you need to share your screen, right?
Yeah, I didn't play by the rules. Sorry, guys. Okay. So thanks, guys. I'm actually psyched to see some of my teammates from these projects on this call that I'm about to share. The presentation that I'm going to do is really, I think, part about a relationship meeting a then PhD student, Deanna, from UMass Amherst, to help us collect some data on wood framed walls. And the study that we're going to look at compares 2 projects that I've had the really good fortune to work on. One from many years ago, completed in 2016. The R.W. Kern Center is a living building project in Amherst, Massachusetts. And then more recently, the Lyceum project at Amherst College. These projects are somewhat different, but also very related. The project on the left, standalone building, on the right, it's an addition, if you can believe it. There's a existing building sort of in the back right corner of that photo. But they're very similarly sized projects. And while they had different goals in terms of their overall sustainability achievements, both identified embodied carbon as a target. I will admit in the first case, which I'll get into here, looking at the R.W. Kern Center, trying to meet the Living Building Challenge, we didn't even know about Tally at the time and started using the tool basically as a check against the Athena eco calculator, which we determined was not super accurate. Turned out actually to have some similar results, we think, from mutually canceling errors. But it was our sort of first foray in learning how to use these tools. And then at the Amherst College project, the college had just identified carbon neutrality by 2030, the year before they'd agreed to their plan, and before we started construction on this project. And they're a campus that's actually walking the talk. They're rebuilding their entire heating, cooling, and powering systems, and they will actually get to net neutrality for 2030 just based on the operations. So when we were engaged to work on this project, they wanted to go beyond that and really think about what the building was being made out of and tackling the embodied impacts as well. And at that point, we knew a little bit more about how to deal with this, and we started to use this as an example of how to benchmark a project. The college in the end decided not to pick a third-party certification process, but we used it as an example to try to set like what is a really good target, how can we measure that, and then like what are the strategies in order to get there. And in both of these projects cases, our first focus was on structure, but then very quickly turned to wall assemblies. And these are some wall assemblies that we looked at very early on just to compare like how would you actually build the envelope of the new portion of these buildings, starting actually on the right hand side with a more business as usual steel studs, exterior insulation, and then all the way on the left, which is where we wound up, which is a double stud wood cavity wall. And in the first project, we have a very similar double stud wall as well. But when we got to the Lyceum project, we had an envelope consultant who was very nervous about putting all of our insulation in the cavity, which we'll get into in a second. But we had Jacob on our team to help us look at these 3 different options and really determine why you might make some choices about what you're building your wall out of, and why you might not want to choose business as usual. And we were able to work collaboratively with our client and their envelope consultant to try to figure out how do we make an actual durable wall assembly using basically wood-based materials. So we have these 2 projects. They're both very, very similar. They're both located a couple miles from each other. They're in the same climate. They have almost the exact same wall assemblies. However, in the more recent project, we had included a smart vapor barrier, and we actually, through doing some mock-ups, wound up needing to locate it in 2 different locations. So the left-hand side is the project that we built, finished around 2016. We came to the conclusion with our, we were actually working with Mark Rosenbaum on this project. We came to the conclusion that we could rely upon the latex paint as our vapor retarder. So no real vapor retarder in that. And then on the right-hand side, the 2 different wall assemblies we have for the Amherst project, we wound up using a smart vapor retarder in one case in the middle of the wall, and then the other case on the inside face of the wall. And because I felt like it was really weird that we had all these different recommendations on whether we should or shouldn't use the product or where it should go, it seems like this was a really good opportunity to find out what does it actually do. And so the first case at the Kern Center, when no one could tell us whether we should or shouldn't put the thing in, we decided to stick some moisture meters in the wall just to see what would happen. And so on the left-hand side is a little outline of the plan. The filled in dots are are reading the data within the wall. This case had 2 sensors in the wall, and then some controls. At the Lyceum, we had finally finished our paper on the first building. We wanted to get a few more points. We were working with an envelope consultant, so somehow we wound up with putting 5 points in each one of the walls. Again, part of this was because we were locating the vapor barrier in the middle of the wall, but we have just a heck of a lot more data to look at. And so when we look at the 2 different models, or the data that's coming out of both of these projects, what is interesting, on the upper part we have the more recent project with the vapor barrier, and the lower part we have the more open wall, so to speak. These are reading moisture content, so there's a lot of data you can get out of these little meters. It's a meter system from a company called Omnisense. They were described to me as, I can't remember who said it, but basically they're really easy to use. You screw these things into the wall, you set up a cellular gateway, and then there's an online database that gathers all your information. What we're really concerned about in both of these cases is condensing inside the wall. When you have a cavity filled insulated, when your insulation is in the cavity, you risk moisture, especially on that outside side of the wall. That moisture, if it's in the right temperature zone, can lead to mold growth. In the most simplest form, we're going to go in our session into a lot more detail on the data that we collect, but in the most simplest form, we're looking to keep our walls lower than 20% wood moisture content in order to avoid damaging the wood, but also growing mold. And so you can see in both of these cases, both in the upper one and the lower one, in the middle of the winter, sort of peaking around January time, we're getting upwards of 16% wood moisture content, so we're kind of coming up there, but then it's able to dry out in the summertime. So looking at the difference between these 2 is sort of interesting because the total content is actually not really different at all. And then as we go to the next one, we look at the 2 differences, whether we're locating that barrier on the inside face, on the upper part, or in the middle. What we do see is that there's differences then throughout the different parts of the wall. So all the different colors in each one of these graphs, the gray at the topmost graph is the outermost portion of the insulated cavity. And then you have different locations as you get closer and closer inside. So you kind of see that it's getting spread out a bit more when you put the barrier in the middle. We are still in the process of digging through a lot of this data. So again, this is really about the fact that I am incredibly pleased to have met Deanna to help work through this data so that we actually have, I think, real information about the sort of safety and durability of designing these walls. There is tremendous reason for using biogenic materials in these envelopes. You know, it just makes a humongous difference in the overall embodied carbon of the project. And so what we're hoping is that the more we can kind of share this data, the more strength we give to other projects of this kind of scale to start thinking about using these strategies when they're building, when they're deciding what their envelopes are made out of. I think that, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Christopher. We're going to go back to Mike and Rand.
Good morning, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Mike Grenick. I am a structural engineer here in Boston. I was with LeMessurier for about 20 years, and then 2 years ago started my own company. About to celebrate our 2-year anniversary. Very excited. And I was one of the co-founders of SE 2050. And I'm going to hand it to Rand in a minute. I've given him all of 15 minutes of notice that he's going to say a few words here. But if you can go to the next slide, I'm super, super excited about this session because it's not technical. It's going to be more about the people in the communities. And Rand, this is Rand's brainchild. He's the one that came up with this entire idea, and I was fortunate to have him ask me to be part of this incredible lineup of people. And the way, from as a structural engineer and being part of SE 2050, I'm really excited to talk about how we created, well, first of all, how structural engineers and SE 2050 define what community is, right? I think we all have a slightly different definition of what community means to us. And some of the successes and some of the major challenges that we had creating a community of competitive structural engineers to come together around this particular topic. And I'm really, really excited to share all of the different people that were involved and how their diverse backgrounds, diverse in you know where they're from, where they live, where they practice, like all of that, and how that contributed to some of our successes. And I also want to, really excited to talk about structural engineers in terms of, we have this community of people, and we're all working really hard, and we come together and we actually share a lot of information. It's quite interesting. Quarterly, we get together and we literally talk about what we're doing and what we're working on, but also sort of from a material standpoint, right? We specify a lot of materials that are pretty horrible, frankly, for the environment, and they're also very bad from a health and ethical standpoint. Sand is becoming a personal interest of mine, and trying to figure out where some of our sand is coming from. And then from an architectural standpoint, the silica that you need to produce your glass could be conflict sand, right? So coming from sources in China where they are literally killing people to get the appropriate sand to make these really nice glass in your buildings. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that. And then really, before I hand it off to Rand, I just think that it's important that we share things that have worked in our organizations, what hasn't worked, where we want to go. And then I'm hoping that our audience Q&A will be people asking us, how can we get involved, but also how can we start our own organization? How can we do this, and what does it take? Okay, it's none of us that are going to be speaking in this session have it all figured out, but we're really excited to share some of our lessons learned. And Rand, if we have a few minutes, I'd like him to just say a few words. This is his baby.
Thanks, Mike. I'll introduce myself. I'm Rand Limley, an architect, certified passive house consultant, and sustainability lead at Dream Collaborative, which is a vertically integrated development and architecture firm in Boston, working in the greater Boston area. And I also serve as a member of the admin committee with the Architecture Lobby, which is a group that is trying to organize the architectural profession toward celebrating and accentuating our value as a profession, both within the profession and to the public. And when I saw the theme for this year's Building Energy Conference, I immediately went to, okay, what are some rad organizers that are doing rad work that I can convene, because this is what it's all about, right? Convening. And I'm really pleased that the lineup of folks that I reached out to all said yes. So we're gonna be joined by a familiar cast to some of you. So Mike has already introduced himself. We've already heard from Jim a bit. Meredith is the current director of Built Environment Plus, and Gina Cruz Tavares is the first hire at a group called Gen Unity, which is preparing everyday people to make an impact in the communities around them, just showing them what kind of agency they have to make change. And like Mike said, I'm hoping that people come out of this with not only new organizations to maybe be a part of and join up with, but a renewed sense of agency in this really critical time when organizing is more important than ever, as we move to not just like carbon related sustainable futures, but like people, human centered sustainability. And with that, I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Rand. Thank you, Mike. I actually don't think James or his team is here, but I pulled up the description for this presentation. It's James Kitchen, Chris Magwood, Ace McCarlton, and John Sarah Ruth, and they are presenting on the Bio-Based Materials Collective. So I think we've heard a lot about this group, and they've been pretty active in the CLF community. I think it's going to be a fantastic presentation. Unfortunately, James just wasn't here to share it with us. And I think that was it. So 1 minute to spare. Nice work, everyone. I hope everyone has signed up for the Building Energy Conference. This lineup in itself looks fantastic. Thank you all for sharing. I'm really looking forward to all of this. If anyone has any last words, Jacob, if you want to share anything more as a conference chair, stage is yours.
I am bubbling with enthusiasm and excitement about this. I'm just so thrilled. Really encourage folks. I'm very excited. The Women in Carbon event is going to be sort of not produced, co-supported by NESEA. It's a community event, so hopefully they'll give an opportunity for some good mixing of the crews. And so maybe I'll give one little plug. Actually, this is maybe making like slightly more human, bring more human element into this. We are not only sort of recognizing the, movement building within the conference theme, but also NESEA's 50th anniversary. So huge birthday party this year. So both of these things sort of require celebration. To celebrate an anniversary and also to sustain good movement building should be an act of joy and celebration. So we're looking for folks that have talents, things to offer and share, experiences to curate that would bring some spontaneous bits of joy and celebration into the conference. If you play an instrument, if you are good at face painting, if you like to lead charades, anything that you can think of to bring a little bit of talent, humanity, joy, and celebration to the conference, please reach out to me. We're looking at the breaks just to have some little pop-up celebratory moments, and we want that to be sort of crowdsourced from the community by the community for the community. So let me know if that's something you might want to bring and share, as well as all this incredible, inspiring technical and community organizing knowledge that you're bringing as well. And I'm really excited to connect with you all in person next month.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. We will share information on the Women in Carbon screening shortly. We're still trying to tie up loose ends on that.